Yowzers. IP address classes. Alright, so we've learned how to convert IP addresses to binary, binary to decimal, and so on. Now let's talk about these TCP IP addresses. For instance, if we have the IP address of 192.168.1.1, what class is that? Okay. Now, does anyone remember the 5 classes there were? A, B, C, D, E. Oh, there's no F. A, B, C, D, E. Or A, B, C, D, E. Okay. The way we're going to learn how are these IP addresses classified into these classes, and what do those classes mean. Our outline is just going to talk straight up about that. All right. So starting off, there's our A, B, C, D, E class, our 5 classes. Our 5 classes are identified by many ways, and we're going to talk about at least 3 ways to identify each one. But for simplicity, the easiest way to identify it is by the first octet. The first octet being that first number in the first set of decimals. Okay? If you take that number and you divide 0 through 255 into these sections here, you get your 5 classes. This is the easiest way to figure out what class is an IP address. So a class A would start with 0 through 127. Okay? A class B would start with 128 to 191. A class C would start with 192 to 223. And then the last two, D and E, is 229, 240, but we actually don't use D and E on the internet. Okay, they call them they're private IP addresses, but they call them addresses that are not routable. That means you cannot put them on the internet. They can't talk to other networks. They're private and experimental use. Okay, so the only ones we'll ever see on the internet are going to be A, B, and C. Okay, with a couple of exceptions. The first exception is that we'll never see a 0 network on the internet, and we'll never see a 127 network on the internet. Okay? So A technically starts with 1 through 126. Okay? That's the range of an A on the internet. On the class B, you'll never see a 169 on the internet either. It's an automatic private IP address. Okay? So if it's a 169, it's kind of non-void on there. And then finally on the class C, you will see all of them on the internet, which are by far the most popular ones. All right. All right. So moving along, now that we talked about the easiest way to classify the classifications, let's talk more in depth about each one of the classes. First, we'll start with a class A. In a class A, we have a range of 0 through 127, right? That's what the class A would be. That is the first way to identify that this is a class A, is because of that number right there, okay, 127. In a class A, we have the first octet reserved for the network part, the network portion of the IP address. This network portion of a class A, the first octet, will always start with a binary number 0. It's reserved, the first binary number. So here, a class A will always have a 0 in the beginning. Right? So this can be 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 1. That is a class A. Right? You can also have 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1. That is still a class A, because this will always be a 0. That make sense? Yes? Now, because this is always 0, you'll never get a number higher than 128, because this will always be 0. Right? Because remember our conversions? If we can't use this number, then we'll never get a number higher than 128. We'll get 64, 92, 127, because all of these down are 127, right? We can have 0. So that's why the address range is 0 through 127, because we can't use this first bit. This first bit is blocked off, and Class A's do not use them. All right. So the first way we could identify a Class A network was what? Because of the decimal number of 127. The second way we can identify a Class A network is because the first bit is 0. Okay? By having the first bit as 0, we have these 127 different binary numbers, or 128 total if you count 0. And that gives us 128 networks, or 128 IP addresses that can be part of a Class A network. There's only 127 or 28 numbers, and out of those 128 we can't use 0 and we can't use 127, so there's only 126 total numbers that we can use in the internet as a Class A address. So there's a total of 126 companies that have a Class A address, and they're all used. They're large companies. They're like HP, Apple, AT&T, and so on. Okay. For instance, give me an example of a Class A IP address. 115? Okay. So 115.0.0.0 is a Class A network. Okay. Each one of these 115 network, like for instance, the 115 network would have 16,777,214 hosts in that network. What does host mean? Computers on the network. Okay, so the 115 network has 16,777,214 computers inside of that network. Okay, that's a whole lot of computers for one single network. Okay, the next lecture we'll talk about how that subnets out. But right now we're looking at this one network having 16 million hosts. How many hosts does the 114 network have? Same amount, 16 million hosts. The 116th network has same amount, 16 million computers in their network. This is why only large networks have a Class A network. For instance, you at home, you're not going to have 16 million computers, so they're not going to register a Class A address for you. Okay. All right. So back to how we identify these networks. The third way we identify a network is very simple. It's something called the subnet mask. The subnet mask also comes in ones and zeros, but the ones and zeros mean something different. Okay. A 1 means that you're part of the network, and a 0 means that you're part of the host. And the way these work is that the first binary number connects to the first binary number. The second binary number connects to the second, and the third, and the fourth, and the fifth, and the sixth, and the seventh, and the eighth, and so on. They all keep talking to each other, telling each other that, hey, this 0 tells them, hey, you're part of the host. Hey, you're part of the host. Hey, you're part of the host, and so on, and so on, and so on. So 1 means network, 0 means host. Unlike in binary conversion, when we start ones going that way, we can't stop and then start again. So we have so many ones, we can't stop and then put a 0, then go back to a 1. That's not how subnet masks work. Subnet masks are constant ones until you stop, and then from then on, they're all zeros. Okay? As soon as the first 0 comes into place, the rest of them have to be zeros as well. All right, so now that we know how a subnet mask works, a subnet mask is simply telling the numbers on top if you are part of the network and you are part of the host. And then you're part of the host and you're part of the host. That's all a subnet mask does. Okay? So now, for our sakes, because once again we're humans, and for us it's pretty hard to say you have a subnet mask of 11111111000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000 simply say 255.0.0.0. That's just easier for us. Okay. The computer does not see 255.0.0.0. It will accept it, but the computer really sees 1111111.0.0.0.0.0. Now this is important because when we get to subnetting, we're going to stop dealing in decimal numbers and we're going to start dealing in binary numbers. Okay, so that's the next lecture tomorrow. So there's the three ways that we can identify a class A network. The first way was because of this decimal number right here. It's within the range of 0 through 127. The second way we can identify is that the first binary number will always be 0. And then the third way was that we will have a subnet mask of 255.0.0.0. You with me so far? Yes? Good. Let's talk about a Class B address now. Okay? In a Class B address, what's the first way that we can identify a Class B address? The number range of 191 through, 128 through 191. So if it's within this range, that means that this is a Class B address. Okay? The second way we can identify a Class B address is because no longer is just the first portion part of the network, the first 2 octets are part of the network. Okay? So does it matter what number this is right here? Does this number have to be within a range, the second octet? Yes or no? Yes? No? Anybody? Does it matter? We know that this has to be within this range right here, right? Does it matter what number this is? No. It could be anything between 0 through 255. Okay? So, the first number does have to be within the range, but the second number can be anything. It could be 0. It could be 255. It does not matter. Okay? Because the first number is the first way we identify it. Alright? The second way we identify, okay, that was the first way. The second way we identify a Class B network is the first 2 octets will always be 10. You'll always have 10 in the first two binary numbers will always be 10. So this is written in stone, a 1 and a 0, written in stone. The rest of the numbers, they can be anything. So why does this have to be a 1? What if I made it a 0 here? It would be a Class A. That's right. Because remember, in the Class A, this is always 0. So to negate the Class A, this always has to be a 1, and this always has to be a 0. Okay? So the first 2 numbers will always be 10. The rest of them can be anything. This can be a 1 or a 0. This could be a 1 or a 0, 1 or 0, or so on. Okay? So in a Class B network, you will always have at least 128 binary number, right? But because of the 0, we have to stop there, okay? Because we can't ever add the 0 to it, the next binary number. So that's what gives us the range of 128 to 191. All right. So in a Class B address, the first way we can identify is because we are in the range of 128 to 191. The second way is because we have the first 2 bits reserved as 10. Okay? By having the first 2 bits reserved in 10 and by having these available numbers here and these available numbers there, we now have 16,000 IP addresses that will fall in the Class B network. Okay? How is it that we have 16,000 available Class B networks? What's that?
So you're asking 9 times 255.
That's actually right. It's actually right. Because this number can be anything between 0 through 255, and this number can be anything within this range. So 128.0.0.0 is one network. What would be the very next Class B network? 128.1.0.0. That's a totally different Class B network. Because remember, in a Class B network, the first 2 octets are the network. So those are two separate networks. They're not talking to each other. Unlike in a class A, here's a class A. In the class A, the 126.0.0.0 network and the 126.1.0.0 network are actually the same network. Because in a class A, only the first portion makes the network. Okay? So if you thought of this as a phone number, this would be the area code, right? This would be the 214. And then this would be the number of the computer, or the number of the cell phone in that network. Same thing. This is still in the same area code. This is just a different computer in that area code, or a different phone number in that area code. So over here, because we have the two, where are we at? Right here. Because we have the two portions, we have a much bigger area code, and these numbers identify the computers or the individual addresses inside of each one of those networks. So, because we have only 2 bits to work with for our host, we went from 16 million hosts to only 65,000 hosts. 65,534 hosts per Class B network. Okay? So, in the Class B network of 130.16.0.0, okay, I can have 65,000 hosts in that network by just changing these 2 octets right here. Correct? All right, so what would be the very next network, the very next Class B network? .0.0, and so on and so on. So once this reaches to 255, what would be the very next Class B network? 131.0.0.0. And then the next one would be 1.0.0. You notice that I'm sort of dyslexic. I always start in the end and the middle. All right. So now that we kind of know how to address these, let's talk about the third way to identify a Class B network. It's through the subnet mask. Okay? And remember, what does the 1 mean in the subnet mask? And what does the 0 mean? Host. So all they're doing is they're telling the numbers on top that you're part of the network, you're part of the network, you are part of the network, and then you are part of the host, you are part of the host, you are part of the host, and so on 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 and so on. That's all they're doing. They're just telling the numbers on top if you're part of the network or if you're part of the host, just so that the numbers don't get confused. So in reality, what's more important? The IP address or the subnet mask? The subnet mask. Because if you change the subnet mask, the IP address would think he's something different. Okay? And that's important for us for tomorrow's lecture, when we start subnetting. We start screwing around with the subnet mask and fudge it around so that it makes the IP address do something different, or think that they are something different.
So by changing the subnet mask, you can belong to a different network even though you have the same IP address?
Yes, and that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow. Okay? All right, so in our human eyes, in our human brain, what does these binary numbers equal to? That's right. So the third way you could identify a Class B network is by having a subnet mask of 255.255.0.0. Okay? Class C, no different from the rest. A Class C address, the first way we could identify it is because it's in the range of 192 to 223. The second way is that we have reserved the first 3 bits as 110. Again, coming back over here, 110. If I was to change this into a 0, what kind of address would that be? B. If I change this one to a 0, Class A. So you can always think of it this way. Wherever the first 0 lies, that tells you if it's a class A, B, or C network. Okay. All right. Moving along. So in the class C network, the first way we can identify a class C network was what? The decimal number range. It's between what range? No? I'm sorry, I'm in a class C. The first way we can identify a class C. 192 through 223. That is because it's within that range, we know that that's the class C address. What's the second way we can identify a class C address? The first 3 binary numbers are 110, but are they network or host? They're network. And notice that in the class C, we're now using the first 3 octets as part of your network. No longer is the first, no longer is the second. So what numbers can I have in this octet right here? 0 to 255. And what numbers can I have in the third octet here? 0 through 255 again. Okay. Now in this first octet, I can only have the numbers within this range. So what would be the very first class C IP address? Dot 0 dot 0. This would be the very first class C IP address. Okay? Because this number can be anything. It's the first one that has to be a 192. What would be the very next class C IP address? Dot what? No. Dot 1 dot 0. Why is that? Kind of came in late. Okay, you've taken this before though, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
I've
okay.
taken this before.
Okay. So why is it that this very next IP address is 192.0.1? That's right, because the first 3 identify the network. Okay? So what would be the very next class C address? That 2. And then I will keep going here until I reach what number? Till I reach 255. And when I reach 255, what would be the very next IP address? 192.1.0. And then dot 0, that's right. What would be the very next IP address after that? Dot 1.0, right? And remember, only the very last one would be for host. So we only have 1 octet for host. So how many hosts can I possibly have? We're about to get to that right now. So you realize something, right? You realize that this should be 256, right? This should have been, well, I can have any number between 0 through 255, but there's always exceptions. There's always exceptions. You can't use 0 and you can't use 255. Okay? So that went from 256 minus 2 would give me 254. That is all classes, and that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow. That's the first thing we address tomorrow. Why do we always have to subtract 2 IP addresses? It's for something called the IP ID, the IP address ID, and then something called the broadcast IP. And like I said, that's the first thing we discuss tomorrow. Tomorrow's kind of like the big lecture when we just bring everything. That's the meat and potatoes of the course, of the whole lectures. Huh? Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. So by using the first 3 octets, by using octet 1, 2, and 3, we have a total of 2,097,152 different IP addresses that can be a Class C IP address, which would make it a Class C network. Okay, so we have, because we have anything between here to here to here, and this being a max of 223. That's how we get 2 million networks in the world that are Class C IP addresses. Okay, and each one of those can have up to 254 computers in their network. Okay. Now tomorrow I'm going to tell you forget about this, and we're going to contradict everything we said today. But as of right now, we're still sticking with our story. That's our story, and we're sticking with it. That a Class C IP address can have 254 hosts on each one of them, and only. Yes. Oh, they had a question. All right. So what's the third way that we can identify this as a Class C IP address? Subnet mask, or subnet mask would say what? .0. Okay. Alrighty. So, any questions with a Class C IP address? No? None at all? Alright. So here's our quick cheat sheets. Our quick cheat sheets of identifying a Class A, B, or C IP address is first the subnet mask. You know what? I think I forgot something very important here. Oh no, I'm recording. Good. The first way is our subnet mask. If our subnet mask reads 255.0.0.0, it's a Class A. If it reads 255.255.0.0, it's Class B. And if we have 3 255s, it's a Class C. Okay? Which this right here, by the way, will be the most standard thing you see in the world, because there's so many of them. There's 2 million Class C IP addresses. How many Class A IP addresses were there?
Just
128 minus 2, 126. There's always a minus 2. That's one thing you'll always remember. Minus 2. I forgot to minus 2. All right. And how many Class B IP addresses are there? No? You're off by, yeah, some thousandth number. 16,384 IP addresses, because not only do you have this range, you've also got this range to work with. Okay. All right. So now the other way, the second to best way to identify an IP address, what class it is, it's through the first binary number. Okay, wherever the first 0 lies, that tells you what kind of IP address it is. If the first 0 lies in the first bit, it's an A. If the first 0 lies in the second bit, it's a B. And if the first 0 lies in the third one, it's a C. If it lies on the fourth one, it's a D. If there is no 0 within the first 5 binary numbers, it's an E. Okay, and then there it is right here. Wherever the first 0 lies, that tells you what kind of IP address it is. Okay? The third way, and the best way to identify a an IP class address, is by the first decimal number, the first octet's decimal number. Whatever the number this lies within, you already immediately know what class it belongs to. Okay? So, if you think about what we just talked about right now, what would you say is the most important thing about these different classes? No? What if I said, Jake, you have a Class A IP address? Well, what does that mean?
pretty much like a big company.
A gazillion hosts, right? You have, what was it, 2 million hosts? Something like that? Some ridiculously amount of hosts? 60 million. Oh, just off. Just, 14 million. That's, who would notice 14 million missing? Okay. So that would be the important thing to know. That's the big difference between classes is the number of hosts you can accommodate. So, Bertha, if you had a company who had 30,000 computers, right, and they needed, every single one of them needed an IP address to the internet, what class would you get?
It would be a class B.
Okay. And why a class B?
Because it has up to 65,000
Right.
hosts.
And why not a class B? I mean, a class C?
Because it only does 266,000,
No.
254.
254 hosts, right? So you'd have to register either a whole lot of class C addresses or just one single class B address, okay? And it'd be easier for you to manage. So the most important thing about IP classes is the host, is how many computers can I have in that network that can connect to the internet directly, okay? Because later on we'll talk about indirect connections, NAT and PAT and so on. But right now these are direct connections to the internet, okay? Any questions with IP address classes?
On identifying the first binary digit.
Mm-hmm.
So if the fifth number is a 0, it's a D. The chart was kind of throwing me off a little bit.
Yeah, that chart's off actually.
Oh, so it's the fourth digit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. Anything else? I didn't even notice I had to handwrite it. I didn't even put headers, titles on it. That was kind of like an afterthought, the chart was. Anything else?
I just have a question.
Yes.
I know you said it. How do you get the host again? How do you know?
The
how many
host?
Computers, yeah.
Well, a class A, can we get let's do this. Wow. All right, a class A, we're going to do this. We're going to do a quick chart, okay? Quick chart. It won't take us too long to do. We're going to cover A, B, and C. Why are we not going to cover D and E? They're not on the internet, so you'll never see them. They can't connect to other networks. All right, so in a Class A address, there's two things that are kind of important about any class IP address. We talked about one. What was the first one that we talked about? That's important about classes? The number of hosts. Come on, guys. Actually, let's do this. So, for instance, when I said, Jake, you have a Class A address, what does that mean? You say, well, I have a ton of hosts. Number of hosts. Okay. What would be another important thing about a Class A, B, or C address? How many networks they actually are. Okay. So we talked about a Class A has how many hosts? Whoa. This board's acting kind of goofy.
16,770,000.
Number of networks. All right, so a Class A had how many, Bertha?
Networks or hosts?
Host. How many hosts did a Class A?
3,777,214.
So that's how many hosts I can have in a Class A network, right? But how many Class A networks exist? 128 networks exist. Okay. How many Class B networks exist?
16,000.
Somebody besides Bertha. Jake? No? Six. All right. So who's going to take that one? Who's going to take credit for that one?
See, that's my question. How do you know that?
Because I'm running it on the board. It's just that's the way they are. That's a Class B address has there's 16 different.
Mathematically, yeah, but
Okay.
is there a way to determine it? I guess I understand that that's the most that it has, but how did they come up with that number?
Okay, I see what you're saying. Let's take we'll do the easiest one, a Class C address. Somebody give me a Class C IP address. It's actually .0.
That's 0.
Why is it .0?
It's a network.
Because this is the network, and the host always starts with 0. Okay? So these numbers identify the network, but these identify the host. And whenever you identify the host, you always start with 0. Okay? All right. Because the host can be anything between 0 through 255, right? Correct? Well, we're almost there, right? Well, that's what we're talking about. So, because the host portion can be 0 through 255, and the first one is the 0, we can't use the 0 anymore, because this is now known as our ID. Okay? This is our identification. So now we become 1 through 255. Okay? All right, so now we've got our network set up, and this is the network that is registered with IANA, the Internet Network. Let's see here. I forgot what it's called. Numbers Authority. That's all I remember, I think, at the end. Where's my little... There it is. Oh, you know what? This has a 2 right here. The Internet Assigned Numbers Authority, IANA. All right, so that first one is the IP address that gets set up with IANA, and they register the .0 network, so therefore you can no longer use it inside your network. This is identified as your house, okay, or your business. So now you get your business and you start setting up IP addresses. You set up the first one. What is the first one? .1. That is the very first one. You'll probably go to your router or to your server or somebody to start giving out IP addresses to everybody else. So what is the very next one that your very next computer can use? 192.168.2. And then the next one? 3, all the way down to 254. And then the last one would be 255. Well, there's only one trick with that. Is that 192.168.1.255 has to become something known as your broadcast that all your computers use to talk to each other whenever they're lost. They're like the shoulders of the freeway. They're there, you're just not supposed to drive on them. Okay? That's whenever a computer gets lost, that's where it goes to. It goes to the broadcast. All right, so we can't use 255, so our range got smaller again. Our range now became 1 to 254, right? Now, how did we get, Stephanie, 254 hosts? One through 254? Because the host portion is the only thing that we can set up in our business to talk to the internet. Okay? So that's how we got 254 for a Class C, correct? Anybody see that? Anybody not see how we got 254 for a Class C? All right, well, let's talk about a little bit harder one. Let's talk about a Class B. In a Class B, go ahead and give me a Class B IP address. .130. What was it? No? Oh, okay, sorry. 130. What? .1.00. Now, why is the last 2.00? That's the host, so they always have to start with 0, right? And then 130.1 is your network. Okay, so now we got 130.1.0.0, which gets registered with who? Internet IANA, Internet Assigned Numbers Authority. Ooh, look at that! I have a memory. Wow. All right. So we have 130.1.0.0. Okay. The very first IP address that you can use in your network, in your home, is what? Dot what? Dot 1. That's right. So you can't use the first one. So this range was 0 through 255, but 0 got knocked out. and 0 through 255. Whoa, 255 is the second range. You can use both of these ranges, except for 0 because 0 got assigned by the INA. And then what's the other one you're going to lose?
0, 1, 250. 0 through 250. You're going to lose 250.
You're going to lose the very, very last one. Your very last IP address, which would be what?
130.1.0.255.
No. No, we're all lost sheep, aren't we? Meh. All right.
130.255.0.
No, you were so close.
135.255.
That's correct. 130.1.255.255 won't be used. Because that's the broadcast, that's the very last IP address that they all use to talk to each other. Okay? All right, so now this became a range of 1 through 254. And 0 through 254. You're right. It's kind of hard because this you can use 255.0 and 255.1 and 255.2. You just can't use 255.255. So 255. Okay. All right. So now let's go back to our numbering and how do we get that this IP address can have 65,000 hosts? Okay. Because that was the initial question, right? How do we get 65,000 hosts out of that? Well, let's think about it. This is the first number you can have, right? What is the very next number you can have? No? .0.2, because 0 is part of your host. That counts as part of your host. What's the very next one? .3, and you would keep going all the way till you reach what? 0.255. This time you can use 0.255 because the one that you lose is 255.255 and 0.0. So those are the two that you lose.
So is it basically 255 times 254 comes up with whatever it is that
Yes.
the total number of hosts?
Right, so that's basically, you just calculate that going backwards, right?
I'm
Going
not sure.
this way.
Yes, because see, within this range you've got 255, right? That's just in the 0.
Right, so it'll be 255 times 254.
And then 1.250, 1.0 will still have to reach 255, and so on 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 and so on. Does that make sense? It's exactly what they said. It's 255.
Or is it 256 times 250?
Well, we can grab a calculator and find out. There's an easy way to figure that out. Minus 2. You got to remember the minus 2 as well. 256 times 256. No, it's 65,536
Minus 500.
minus 2. So it's 256 times 256
You lose one for network and one for
minus these two right here.
She was throwing me off the blood.
You know what? I do that all the time.
Oh, it's 256
Times 256, yes.
minus 2.
Why is it 256 though?
Because you got the 1, the 0.
That's right. Because 0 through 255,
So everything is still a part of the,
Okay.
network.
yeah. So all those are part of the network, even the 0 and the 256.
yes, but except for that you can't use the 0 and 255. Except for that you can't use the very first one, which would be 0.0, and you can't use the very last one, which is 255.255. You don't lose that whole 0 range. You can still use 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4. You just can't use 0.0.
So you can use beginning.
The beginning and the end. Alpha and the omega. So it's 256 times 256 minus 2 at the end. I'm glad we got that out of the way. All right, and then in a class C, why would a class A be how many hosts?
16.
Million.
So it's 256 times 256 times 256 minus 2.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Correct. All right, so does that answer your question? I hope so, because we're not going through it again.
Hey, that was great.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. All right. Any other questions? IP addresses. The importance of each one is actually the number of networks and the number of hosts. So I'll make it easier and just write 16 million something something. How many hosts are in each class B address? 65,534 was it? Yes. How many class C IP addresses is? Ew. Anybody?
Networks?
Yes. How many networks in class C? 2 million. And how many hosts in each one of those? 254. So those are the two important things you've got to know for each one of these IP addresses. There's only 128 networks that are part of a Class A address. Each one of those 126 networks has 16 million hosts within it. Okay? And there's 16 million Class B networks.
So it's 128,000.
You're right, 16,000.
Yeah, 16,300.
Whoa, what the heck? All right. So in the bare essentials,
I knew something was wrong with that. I couldn't figure out what it was.
it went from
I thought you would correct yourself. No.
there it is. All right.
There you go.
Numbers look a little better because it was 126, 16 million, and then down to 2 million.
I know, I just couldn't.
And then let's make this simplified right over here. All right, so there's 126 networks that are Class A. Within each one of those 126 networks, there's 16 million hosts, 16,777,214.
And plus they choose 128 that you deduct
Minus the two that you can't use, right? There's always a minus 2. All right, so now in a Class B address, there's 16,000 companies or 16,000 IP addresses that are part of a Class B address, and each one of those 16,000 has 65,534 hosts within it. Now Class C, there's 2 million IP addresses that are part of a Class C, and inside of each one of those Class C, there's 254 computers that can be within it. Okay? Any questions? No? So there's the bare essentials. The important thing, the most important thing you've got to come out of this with would be how to identify an IP address. Okay? The easiest way will always be to just look at the first octet and then decide from there. Okay? But the good thing is that if I give you a binary number of this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, you know what class that is, right? A. Because the first 0 lies within the A slot. Okay, wherever the first 0 lies. For instance, if this was this, now what is it?
It's a B.
Now it's a B because the first 0 is in the second slot. And then finally, if this was this, Class C, because the first 0 lies in the third slot. So wherever the first 0 lies, A, B, or C, you know what address that is. Okay? And then the subnet mask would be the real deciding factor on telling the IP address what kind of IP address it is.
Do those have ranges outside, like the zeros have ranges, right? Like it'd be like 255, 0, and then do those have any ranges after those?
No, the way subnet masks work is that there's ones from left to right, and then there's zeros from right to left. They're segregated. There's no mingling. Okay, no ones and zeros. They can be all ones. Now, what we do in subnetting is that we skew that line. For instance, instead of having 8 ones, we'll add 16 ones or 30 ones and so on, 27 ones and so on. But we can't mix it 1 0 1 0. We can't do that. Okay.
So you're only ever going to get a 0 and a 255. You never have like 128.
Well, in subnetting we will.
Okay.
In subnetting. But remember, the most important thing is looking at ones and zeros because that's how we really decide the factors. Okay. So, but it will change. It could be like 255.128.0.0, 255.224.0.0. So, but that's tomorrow. That's tomorrow. Tomorrow's the real meat and potatoes. That's when we cover a lot of stuff.
Wish I could make
You can, in
Katie's
spirit. Oh, it's Katie's birthday?
Yeah, she's not gonna
Tell her we'll have a birthday math quiz for her.
have a 21st birthday.
Yeah, math quiz. Yeah. Alrighty. Well, that covers that. Any questions? No? Anything for me to sign? Uh-oh. Sorry, I need y'all to fill this out for me. Put IP addresses.
This is in your class you got it, right?
Hmm?
IP addresses? Because
TCP/IP?
you used to just go to
No, it's because it used to be 2 hours straight. Then I divided it into 1 hour and 1 hour. But tomorrow's and Thursday's class, there's no way to divide it. The 2 hours have to be back to back.
halfway through.
Where are we at?